hardest part is figuring out what you want to master.
Focus on your product.
Can you tell somebody that they suck?
You gotta just go, this is exactly what I want to do for a living.
You can't even tell somebody that their breath is life.
All right, here we are, Robert Greene. I got to tell you, man, I'm really, really excited for this podcast. And in my world, you're a legend.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, and I'm really
I don't
excited.
feel like a legend, but
Really?
yeah.
It's amazing. In my world, you are 100% a legend. And like I was telling you before we started, I'm really excited to share your work and your thought process and that stuff with my audience. You know what I mean? Because I think that there's probably a lot of my listeners and viewers that aren't as familiar with your stuff as they should be.
Okay.
And I think everyone in the world has heard of 48 Laws of Power, and I think Mastery, most of my audience. But
Art of Seduction, maybe.
Art of Seduction, and then this new one, Laws of Human Nature, just came out, and I don't know, I can't get behind it enough. I can't recommend it enough.
Wow.
And I think that I'm just so excited to be able to have a conversation with you about it and show everyone a little bit about what's going on in there.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'm equally excited.
Great. This is
I'm in
great.
your hands.
So
Yep.
normally what I do is I go through people's whole stories, but I want to spend more time on the actual stuff from the book. So I guess my first question is just, where are you? Can you kind of give me where are you from? How did you, what was growing up like, and how did you find this path in life to write these types of books?
Well, I've always been somebody who kind of stays on the sidelines and observes people. You know, I've always been fascinated. Was a bit of a kind of a lonely child, got heavily into drugs and things like that.
Really?
Yeah.
At what age?
About 16, 17, I had really long hair. I was a bit of a hippie.
Wow. And where are you from? What area?
Los Angeles.
Oh, you're from out here.
Yeah.
I never would have guessed that.
Yeah.
I never would have guessed that, like a long-haired hippie,
Yeah.
you know.
Tons of LSD and things like that. I don't want to promote these things, but
That's
that's where.
amazing.
But you know, I look back on that, and that stuff really kind of changed my brain in a way, made me look at the world a certain way.
Yeah.
But I always felt like I was a bit of an outsider, and I knew I wanted to be a writer. And then I had my wife and I calculated I've had 80 different jobs. Kind of didn't know what I wanted to do, but in each of my jobs, I liked observing the power games that people played. And I had this idea that people wear masks. They're never what they seem to be.
Yeah.
They present a smiling, pleasant, wonderful, liberal image.
Yeah.
But behind closed doors or in their home with their children, there's a dark side. There's a secret asshole inside of them. And you never get to see that. And that kind of got me a little bit angry. I worked in Hollywood for a while, and I saw a lot of these kind of asshole types that projected this very pleasant, wonderful exterior.
Yeah.
And so this man once asked me if I had any ideas for a book. He was a book producer. And it just kind of vomited out of me this idea about power and how things haven't changed from the time of Machiavelli and Cesare Borgia and Louis XIV. It's always been the same kind of game.
Yeah.
The kind of manipulations that powerful people play. And he loved the idea, and then all of my life experiences of observing my parents, my peers in high school, all the different jobs, it just poured all of that into that book.
Yeah.
And that changed the course of my life.
That's amazing. And why had you been doing any other types of writing?
Yes, I'd been in journalism for a while. I tried writing novels. I bummed around Europe for several years trying to write this great novel, which never really came to fruition.
Yeah.
I moved to LA. I got into Hollywood. I wrote screenplays that never really got anywhere. I was very frustrated. I was about 36. My parents were about to give up on me. I was headed toward being a loser,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And then this opportunity came for writing a book, and I was so hungry to change my life that for 2 years I ate, drank, and slept this book. It just consumed me because I thought this is my one way out of the life I had been leading.
That is fascinating. And so that all came from someone just saying, hey, do you have any book ideas?
Well, I was in Italy for a project. We were both there, and we were both wandering around in Venice. And we kind of got along really well, and he asked me for any ideas and books, and then that's just, as I said, just sort of spewed out of me. And he liked it so much, he decided to pay me to live while I wrote the book.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And then when that book first came out, was it an instant success?
It was pretty big. It's a weird book.
Yeah.
I mean, anybody who sees it, it's a weird book. You've never seen anything quite like it.
Yeah.
So it's created quite a stir. It's also a very amoral, dark book.
Yeah.
So it created quite a stir. It was a bit of a hit, and then about 2 years later, for some reason, it hit the hip hop world,
Yeah.
and that just boosted the book into the stratosphere. Like Jay-Z and 50 Cent and other people started quoting from it,
Yeah.
and it kind of got its way, made its way into popular culture.
And then you went and did the 50th Law with 50 Cent.
Yeah, yeah.
How was that process? Was that fun to do, or it seems? I remember when I first saw it, right? Because I was probably, I don't remember how old. I was probably 23 or 24 when that came out, and I remember thinking it was so cool that such a, like, I really look at you as like a very, I don't know, serious, like real deal writer. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And then 50 Cent, and what you guys put out was actually really cool. It didn't feel cheesy.
Uh-huh.
It didn't feel
That's
too,
good.
you know what I mean? Was it fun doing that, or?
It was really fun. It's kind of a subversive book because I'm trying to show lessons that I learned from being around. I spent like 3-4 months around him, tagging along with him everywhere he went. And, you know, I sort of took his experience as a hustler, as a crack dealer,
Yeah.
and kind of applying it to business, which is a very strange concept.
Yeah.
You know, how to become a hustler in life
Yeah.
and how to be fearless. It was a lot of fun because I spent all of my time alone reading books, reading about Napoleon, etc. And here was 50 Cent, a living, breathing incarnation of the 48 Laws of Power.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of fun, and I saw some weird shit, I can tell you.
I bet, man. You just did a great job at tying in, like, he is, like you said, he is a living, breathing incarnation of everything you wrote about, even though you wouldn't necessarily, I don't know. I just think it's so hard to pull that off, right? Because normally when you incorporate a rapper or someone like that into something so real and serious, it can just be corny,
Yeah, I know what
you know?
you mean.
And it came off really well.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you.
So 48 Laws of Power then just launched like a rocket ship. The way it works in that world is like, then is it kind of, you can do whatever you want? Like, what do you want to write about next? You can do anything.
It did sort of give me that, you know, and then I was able to do The Art of Seduction next, which was kind of something that I was very interested in.
Yeah.
So yeah, I could kind of write my ticket. I'm very, very lucky because if I've talked about this with my editor and such, and my agent, if that book, The 48 Laws of Power, had come out like 5 years ago,
Yeah.
it wouldn't have been a success. It came out at exactly the right time.
Yeah.
It hit the right nerve, and so I'm an extremely lucky person. But yeah, I can pretty much write my ticket now.
That's so good.
But but I still feel, every time I write a new book, I still feel really neurotic and anxious.
Yep.
Like this book could fail, and I better make it better than any other book that I've ever written.
Yeah.
So I don't like to get, you know, sort of resting on my laurels.
Sure,
Okay.
sure. No, yeah. And then have you ever had any, like your parents, or was there ever any funny moment of like, holy cow, like the long-haired hippie guy turned into Robert Greene? You know, like it just seems like, who would have thought looking at a window of you at that age that this would be you now?
Yeah, a lot of people, you know, who knew me when I was younger, they were a little bit kind of frightened by the success of it because they never pictured in their mind, they always pictured me as sort of kind of their inferior,
Yeah.
someone who would hit them up for money or for a job or something.
Yeah.
My parents were ecstatic.
Yeah.
They
I
didn't
bet.
they didn't care that the book was about Machiavelli and amoral and very dark.
Yep.
They just saw that, you know, I was getting interviews, you know, I was in the Washington Post, I was on the O'Reilly Factor, that's all they cared about.
Yeah.
So they were ecstatic. But a lot of people were really kind of weirded out by the sudden change, because it was very sudden.
Yeah. That's amazing. And is your like opinion on because you keep saying how it's kind of dark, which I get that. I do get that. Is your stance on it kind of like, this is just how it works? You're not saying it's good or bad. This is just
Right.
how power works.
Yeah, I'm trying to show you. See, I came from my own background. I'm a little bit naive in power situations, and it caused me a lot of suffering. So, for instance, law number one is never outshine the master.
Yeah.
Don't appear so great that the person above you feels insecure, like you're trying to take their job. I violated that law over and over again. I was a bit naive. So I wanted to write the book for people like myself so they could understand how the power game operates. So I'm not necessarily, one of the laws is get other people to do the work, but take the credit for it. I'm not telling you you need to do that. I'm telling you need to be aware that other people are going to be doing that to you.
Yep.
So I'm not advocating, going out there and being ruthless and amoral. I'm trying to show you there are people like that out there.
Yeah.
A lot of people are out there like that.
Yeah.
And you need to understand how they think and how they manipulate so you can defend yourself.
Yeah. And then have you ever, because in my opinion, your books are very, there's information in your books that can change people's lives, right? By following the laws, understanding the laws, that sort of thing. Have you ever had any crazy moments of anyone coming up and being like, Robert, you changed my entire life? Or
I'm sorry, I don't mean to brag, but I get that all the time.
I love that.
Because my books are designed to they're kind of long, they're kind of involved. I'm trying to immerse your head in a whole new different way of thinking.
Yeah.
And a lot of people have taken the power book and have completely changed their careers. They stopped making the kinds of mistakes that I made. They know they'd never outshine the master. They've learned to talk less.
Yeah.
They've learned to be more in control of themselves. They've learned how to project a certain kind of presence. Yeah, for a lot of people, it's really changed their lives.
I just think, that has to be the coolest feeling.
It is. I get emails all the time saying, I was heading downward. I was in a bad relationship, and I read the 48 Laws of the Art of Seduction, and it really turned my life around. I've collected them, and it makes all the loneliness and all the hard work kind of really pay off.
Yeah. And that's why I think, in my opinion, the laws of human nature, I think the timing is perfect. Meaning, I think that, it's no secret that we live in a time where everything's incredibly polarized and you see crazy stuff on the news and people lashing out and, whatever. And it just feels like almost we're in a moment where it feels like they're going backwards in human nature and not listening to their higher selves or not, as you talk about that. But do you think that, did that have anything to do with the timing for the book, or did that just kind of match up? Or
most definitely. And whenever I write a book, I'm kind of feeling the zeitgeist, what's happening in the world right now. I do a lot of consulting work with powerful people, and I've noticed increasing amounts of them have very poor people skills, very poor political skills. They hire the wrong person. They don't understand how to judge a person's character.
Yeah.
And it's odd that, we live in the most sophisticated time in history with the technology that we have. And that technology, as you say, is almost making us more and more primitive.
Yeah.
Less and less able to understand the people that we're dealing with. To me, it was like a plague out there.
Yeah.
And when I wrote Mastery, I had a chapter on social intelligence. I'm trying to tell you, the reader, you can be brilliant, you could be the best hacker in the world, but if you don't understand people, if you don't have that skill, you can throw it all out the window because you're going to offend people you don't mean to offend, and you're going to be fired, and all these other things are going to happen. I wrote that chapter, and I got all these emails from people saying, I loved it, Robert, but I need to know more. Like they were desperate for more information about how to have this kind of social intelligence.
Yeah. And so that's essentially what this whole book is.
Yeah, it's a 600-page elaboration.
Yeah, you want
of
more?
A short
Here's more.
chapter. Yeah.
It's so good. So you kind of answered that next question of mine, but it says in the intro that it's you call it a code book for deciphering people's behavior.
Yeah.
If you could say what the goal was, what was the goal for putting this out? To just get people to understand, not get trapped in their ways more?
I want to change your perspective, how you look at the people around you.
Yeah.
So most of the time, you're not paying attention. You're not really listening to people. You have these kind of simplified images of of who they are.
Yep.
You kind of project onto them your own problems. You judge people as good or bad, friendly or unfriendly,
Yep.
and you have no insight or understanding of people. And the reason is that you're not really truly interested in other people. You're mostly interested in yourself and in your own ideas.
Yep.
And I want to change your perspective. I want to tell you, people are fascinating. People are weird. They're a lot weirder than you think they are. Even that guy who's just handing you your coffee in the morning every day, he's got issues. He's got traumas from his childhood. He's dealing with all sorts of stuff you can't even see.
Yeah.
If you could look into people's dreams, you would realize they're a lot weirder than you think.
Yeah.
People are fascinating. And I want you to change your whole way of looking at them and to start putting your mind outward instead of inward.
Yeah.
To start focusing on trying to figure out the puzzle of who these people are. And as you say, I'm giving you the code book. I'm giving you a way to decipher what's going on behind their masks.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating. You know, we love watching movies because we like to get inside these characters and what they're thinking.
Yeah.
You know, a psycho killer or whomever. But the people you deal with every day are just as interesting as those figures in movies.
Yeah.
But you don't see it that way. And I want to shift your whole perspective.
Yeah. Because you have a part in there, right, about like taking all of that self-love or self-centeredness and transforming it into empathy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And how would you, like, let's say I read the book and I'm like, oh shit, I'm an asshole, right? I'm a self-centered asshole. How can I, which I'm guessing a lot of people will, how
You
can
said that about you?
No, say that about when you're reading it, right? I think you'll read it and be like, "Oh shit, like I'm one of them." You know, like I do this. How do you transform that? I mean, is it about going out and asking people how their day's going, becoming more fascinated by the strangeness of human beings? Like, just how do you exercise it?
Well, it's first of all, you know, in writing the book, I had to come to terms with what you were saying. I had to realize, you know, Robert, you're more of a narcissist than you think.
Yeah.
You have a dark side. You're a pretty aggressive person. So I had to confront that, and I'm hoping the reader confronts that. Because in confronting who you really are, some of we all have negative traits. And I'm trying to take you away from the judging game. I want you to have a more Zen approach to the social. I want you to judge people less and understand them more.
Yeah.
So when you realize that this is who you are, it's kind of a liberating feeling.
Yeah.
You're not so trapped in being a narcissist anymore. But you can only start to change that once you're aware of these flaws that you have. And it's hard to look at our own flaws. But I kind of give you a way of observing people. So for instance, I want you to take this idea that there's a whole language that people speak that you aren't paying attention to, and that language is nonverbal, right? So, you know, the way people smile at you, their fake smiles, the way they look at you when you first approach them, the tone in their voice, whether they're always late when they come to meet you, you know, how they treat their children or their employees. These are all signs of who they are. And I'm trying to show you this other sort of hidden language that exists in the social realm, and it's very fascinating.
Yeah.
And once you start picking this up, once you start realizing, this woman who I'm interested in,
Yeah.
I can now realize that, you know, she is actually attracted to me because she's giving off these signs. This person that I'm trying to persuade to invest in my film or some idea that I have, I can tell now that he is not interested at all in my idea.
Yeah.
His body language. Okay, how do I respond? How do I learn from this?
Yeah.
When you start getting that awareness, it's like the red pill in the Matrix.
Yeah.
The whole game shifts, and you start thinking on a different level. You realize, I did this wrong. I'm reading people wrong.
Yeah.
And it will change, it will radically alter how you approach looking at people.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's more of just an awareness. It's like you just have to be shown it, and then you just see things differently. I mean, it really feels like one of those books that after you read it, you're like, oh shit, like I'm going to look at things a little differently from here on out.
Well, for instance, I have a chapter on envy, which is a major theme in a lot of my books. And envy is something that people don't reveal. They don't say, oh, I'm envious, I'm experiencing envy.
Yeah.
It's an emotion that people hide, but that actually motivates a huge percentage of people's behavior. And it's hidden. You're not realizing it. As I say, people don't reveal that they're envious.
Yeah.
So I'm showing you in the book the signs of their envy, why they feel it, and what kind of behavior it motivates. So you're now seeing this kind of shadow realm that you never thought of before.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of trying to reveal these areas that you haven't been aware of.
Yeah. And then what about, one of the things I love that you talk about, and you kind of mentioned it in the lead up here, is like thinking about people in opposites. Thinking about that what they're showing you is actually a reflection of what they're feeling, and usually the opposite.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it's a chapter I have in the shadow, the dark side of people.
Mm-hmm.
But I originally called that chapter weakness compensation. And what it means is when people show you a very strong quality, like hyper-aggressive or hyper-masculinity or hyper-femininity or extreme rebelliousness, and it's a little bit more than normal. It's like this is who they are. They're really kind of pushing this out there in the world. I'm trying to tell you that reveals the opposite, that they are masking the opposite quality. So their hyper-masculinity is actually a way to disguise deep levels of insecurity within them. Like a Donald Trump type person or someone who seems so virile is actually probably a little bit doubtful about their virility.
Yeah.
So people are hiding their weakness. So when you're a child, you're 4 or 5, you realize I have a vulnerability in me, and you don't want to show that because it's painful. So you learn to cover it up with a mask that is the exact opposite.
Yeah.
It's the best form of disguise. So the main lesson from this book and from that what you're talking about is don't take people's appearances for reality. They're hiding something.
Yeah.
And the more pushy, the more they present something to you, the more they're probably trying to conceal the opposite.
Yeah. And what do you gain from knowing that? Like, does it help you the way that you deal with people is better? You're not as reactive to their things. You know what I'm saying? Like, what would be the goal of learning that and being able to decipher that a little bit better?
Well, the main thing is, there are all kinds of qualities that I talk in the book that reveal the opposite. Let's just focus on aggressiveness.
Yep.
Somebody who's a very intimidating person. They know how to push your buttons. They know how to make you intimidated. They know how to make you afraid of them.
Yeah.
Right? And we've all dealt with people like that.
Yeah.
So if you can step back and when you're away from their presence, you can think, well, really, this is a kind of an insecure child who's trying to cover up something, a deep wound that they have. It changes how you react.
Yeah.
So when you're in their presence the next day, you have a few more inches of distance from them.
Yeah.
You don't get ugly, toxic people thrive on churning up drama and making you part of it. Sorry to use that word.
No, it's
making you part of their drama.
Yeah.
They control your emotions. You get the distance from them, you've changed the game.
Yeah.
And I have this story that I've used in several of my books of Joseph Stalin, the great dictator of the Soviet Union, the most intimidating man. His eyes would pierce you. There's stories of people who would literally shit in their pants in Stalin's presence.
Yeah.
And I have the story of this famous composer who hated him and realized what I'm talking about and talked himself into the state where this is a frightened little boy, Stalin, and I'm not going to be intimidated by him. And it worked.
Yeah.
And he was able in his presence to stay calm. And Stalin was so impressed by this that he actually ended up liking the guy and helping him a lot.
Yeah.
So, seeing the mask that people are wearing and what's underneath it really, really can help you deal with them.
Yeah. And how did you, just quickly, little sidebar, because you mentioned the stories, I love the way that you wrote it, where it's kind of like the law and then the story and then the interpretation and then, the different bullet points about it. How did you come up with, I just think that's really, even for someone like me, right, who, just like everyone, I have a short attention span, all that stuff. This is a huge book. Being able to read a nice little story first kind of makes your brain understand it a little bit better, and then you interpret it and whatever. How'd you come up with that, like, structure?
Well, it's the structure that I had from the 48 Laws of Power.
Yeah.
I'm kind of a short attention span person myself, and I hate books that have like ideas and just go on and on and on, and I don't know how to practically apply it, and my eyes glaze over and I get really bored. But when you tell a story, it has a different effect on people. You draw them into the story, and if you tell it well, the reader realizes there's a lesson here. What is the writer trying to tell me? And then I give you the lesson. So I'm leading you along into my world. Because I told you I want to immerse you in a different perspective. And the way to do that is to not bombard you with information and make you kind of, oh shit, this is too boring. It's to lead you in with a story that illustrates the idea. And I choose stories that are the most dramatic and that really kind of illustrate it, but that have application. So when I write about Louis XIV in the 48 Laws of Power, I want you to think of your boss at your office. I want you to think of your father or your mother when you're reading this book right now. So you're not reading about some historical figure. You're reading about your wife, your business partner, or whomever.
I mean, I can only imagine that the research on these things has to be insane. Like, what's the process for a book like this? Do you come up with the laws first and then find the stories that match and then interpret, or do you know some of the stories? Is it a jumble of all of it, or?
I don't know how interesting my process is, but
it's fascinating to me.
Okay.
The fact that you can come up with this thing.
Well, what I do is I start with the idea. I'm going to teach you about human nature. But I don't know what human nature is. I have a completely open mind.
Wow.
I mean, I have biases, of course. I have a negative bias towards people, towards human nature. I admit it. But I'm going to read everything I can. I read books on neuroscience, read books on anthropology, I read books on chimpanzees, I read books on psychoanalysis, I read books on strategies, on history, etc. The full gamut of anything about humans. And from that, I see certain themes that turn into laws of human nature. I originally had about 27 or 28, and then I started realizing these aren't important enough, and I kind of whittled it down to 18. And as I'm going through that research, I'm also reading biographies of people and seeing stories, and sometimes the story stands out, and wow, this is it. Sometimes I don't have a story. So like, for instance, I wrote a chapter on the shadow, the dark side of people. I don't have a story for it. What am I going to do? And I think and think and think, and I think, who's the person who most exemplifies what I'm trying to talk about, this shadow? Aha, Richard Nixon. Here's a man who presents some front to the world, and then suddenly everybody realizes by the Watergate tapes that he's got this dark side to him. And then I have to quickly rush and read an 800-page biography.
Quickly.
And then turn it into a story. So that's my process. It's not that sexy, really.
It's just amazing.
It's a lot of grinding.
I just even the type of books and the length of them and the stuff that you've done, I just can't imagine. And is that, just for my own interest, that's where Ryan Holiday used to work under you, helping research and stuff, right?
Yeah, Ryan was a 19-year-old. He was a student at Riverside. He was also working at a talent agency, and he was friends with Tucker Max, and I, for some reason, knew Tucker. And Ryan tagged along, and he kind of wanted to do research for me. He was a fan. And I saw this really eager, smart kid. He was really literally a kid. And I thought, why not? I've had really bad luck with researchers, but there was something about Ryan. I tell you, we're talking about body language and the secret things that people give off. I could smell someone who was eager and conscientious and really, really wanted the job and was not an egotist. I could smell that this could be a good relationship. And it ended up being really, really good. He was the perfect protege.
That's great. So cool. My other question is, I like that you carve out in the beginning. I'm still in the beginning. I'm not even to law 1 yet in my questions. I'm saying in my questions, I'm still on the intro. I like that you carve out that people like to keep themselves, they remove themselves from the conversation when observing other people's bad behavior or dark behavior or whatever. Like, oh, he's such a narcissist or she's so selfish or whatever. And you just only think of yourself as having good intentions and everyone else potentially bad, right?
Right.
That's a fascinating, what do people do? Like, is there a way that you can break that down and start to look at yourself and look at everyone a little bit more fairly? Or is that just naturally one of our sort of biases towards things? Or what do we do about that fact?
Well, that's law number one of human nature, is the fact that we try to deny that we have human nature.
Yeah.
So if there are people who are narcissists out there, it's always that other guy. If there are people who are aggressive, it's him or her, it's never me. If there are people who feel envy, oh, I never feel envy.
Yeah.
I'm not irrational. I don't have a dark side. I don't have a bad attitude.
Yeah.
Okay, no, I'm trying to say we all come from the same source. We all share the same nature. Our brains are wired pretty much the same.
Yeah.
There's actually very little difference between who we were now and who we were 10,000 years ago.
Yeah.
So if we all come from the same source, we all have the same flaws and the same propensities. We all have aggressive tendencies. We all tend to be self-absorbed. I pound this fact into your stupid little brain over and over again in the book. I don't let you try and wriggle out and say, oh, no, it's not me. I'm not like it. It's the other guy.
Yeah.
No, you are a narcissist. You are self-absorbed. Some people are much bigger narcissists than you are, granted, but you share that trait. And the only way out of that trap is to become aware.
Yeah.
And once you become aware, it does sort of change how you look at yourself and how you think of other people. You are less judgmental about them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just such a good way to start off the book, because I personally have gotten a lot of, and I never thought, when I was 22, I never thought I'd be saying this, honestly, but I've gotten a lot of help and growth out of books like this. But it only came from realizing that I am very flawed. And I've met a lot of people that are very flawed that I recommend books to and things like that, that don't see themselves in it. And so you don't see the help in it because you don't see that you're even in it.
Right.
You know, and I just think it's such a cool way, if everyone reading a book like this can sort of break that wall down, at least in private, while they read the book, it just can be so beneficial. But without it, it's like, oh yeah, dark sides. I know a lot of people like that. And, oh yeah, well, you know what I mean?
Well, I want to try to show you it's not a heavy thing. It's actually a very liberating thing.
Yeah.
To sort of realize that you have a dark side, that you have aggressive tendencies. You can stop being so fake.
Yep.
You can stop trying to pretend that you're somebody else to people. And you can let out your dark side a little bit more. You can give vent to some of your aggressive impulses. You can understand your irrationality and not necessarily try to disguise it. And you'll feel much better. You'll feel more authentic.
Yep.
You'll feel licensed to be more of yourself.
Yeah. And then lastly, the other thing on the kind of setup for this is you talk about the higher self and the lower self.
Yeah.
Can you just tell me quickly what's the difference and how do you spot which one's maybe talking at any given moment? Or?
Well, it's very easy. The lower self is the animal part of our nature.
Yep.
It always takes the path of least resistance. It wants things to be easy and quick, like an animal. It doesn't want to, it wants fast food. It wants to play video games all day.
Yeah.
It wants to just waste time. It wants to procrastinate. It wants to get immediate attention from people, has no patience, no discipline, no desire for work. We all have the lower self because we all have an animal nature. And probably 90% of our behavior in life is giving into that lower self. But at moments, we get a sense of something else inside of us. We completed a project. How rare is it that we have a great idea and then we actually execute it and it actually works?
Yeah.
And when you do that, what a great feeling. You feel complete. You feel like you're a whole person, like you actually did something.
Yeah.
When you feel disciplined, when you're 250 pounds and you need to lose weight and you need to get in shape and you spend several months and you do it, it's a great feeling. That's your higher self. When you suddenly stop being less selfish and you're involved in a project that you believe in and you work well with other people, it's a great feeling.
Yeah.
You don't feel so petty and so selfish and so self-absorbed. You feel like you're really connected to other people. That's your higher self. You have felt that in your life.
Yeah.
Everybody has. That's the little voice inside of you saying, come on, let's try and realize that higher self more and more. And in each of the chapters, the laws where I describe these kind of flaws that are in our nature, I show you how you can turn it around, how you can transform them into that higher nature.
Yeah. And is that the key to success and a fulfilled life, is following that higher self and following through with the higher version of yourself and sort of learning to tame the beast animal self, would you say? Is it, or is that too simple?
Yeah, I think it is. Of course, you don't want to repress the animal. They have a metaphor that I use in the first chapter about the rider and the horse.
Yep.
So let's just think of yourself as a person riding a horse. The horse is your animal side. It's wild, it's an animal. It wants to run free, do whatever it wants. It wants to eat whatever on the side of the road.
Yeah.
Okay? And you are the rider on top of that horse. And you have to tame it and you have to direct it in the direction you want. But that horse has power and force. If you hold the reins too tightly, the horse won't do anything. It won't go at full speed. So you want to use your animal energy. You want to use your aggressiveness. You want to use that kind of power that's in you that all humans have, but you want to be able to channel it intelligently. Yeah. So that's sort of how I describe it.
Would you say like great, especially competitive achievers like a Kobe Bryant are people who mastered the ability to channel the dark side?
Yeah, and it's interesting. All great achievers, if you look at them, they do have a dark side.
Yeah.
Kobe has shown the dark side on occasion, right? I look at somebody like Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
We like to venerate someone like Steve Jobs for all the great things he invented, but he was not the nicest person. He was a bit of an asshole.
Yeah.
He was not good with people. But that dark energy that he had was necessary for him to be creative. Yeah. Creative people use their dark energy. Successful people use their aggressiveness. Yeah. So if Kobe Bryant tried to just stop being so competitive and just kind of tamp it down and just kind of go with the flow, he wouldn't have been as successful as he was. Yeah. He took that insane intensity and he channeled it into a highly disciplined person.
Yeah. This topic is just so interesting to me because I feel like, obviously we know a lot of people who've been overcome by their dark side.
Yeah.
We know people who, like you just said, have tried to like sort of tame it and keep it, but like it seems like the greatest achievement and fulfillment comes from channeling it and like mastering it, and I that's just a very fascinating thing to me.
If you try and repress it, what ends up happening is we read stories about this in the news. It'll be that politician who runs off, leaves his wife and runs off with a 20-year-old model.
Absolutely.
Or, commits some kind of crime that you're repressing it so much that by the time you hit 40 or 50, some kind of action that you can't even control comes out. Yeah. And you kind of ruin your life and your reputation.
Fascinating. Okay, so you start off the book with, and luckily we already kind of covered a lot of this topic, but you start off the book with the first law, which is the law of irrationality. And this is, once again, a topic that I absolutely love because I think through a lot of the stuff that I read and as I started to kind of get more into this type of stuff, I realized the insane amount that we operate our day-to-day lives through biases and through prejudgments and through all these different weird filters.
Yeah.
I mean, do you think it's the vast majority of our days are spent operating through biases and preconceived notions and those sort of things?
Yeah, I'm trying to tell you that to be rational, to see things as they are, to have that kind of intelligence is a struggle. You have to work at it. You have to overcome all of these natural biases that are in human nature, and you have to overcome all of the problems that social media presents that tend to worsen our irrational tendencies. It's a daily struggle. You have to learn, but the only way you can begin to overcome this is to see it first, to understand that emotions are governing your decisions in life. I mean, people in marketing have known this for 50 years. It's the revolution in marketing, which is, they call it the heuristic, the effective heuristic. People just make decisions to buy things, not based on rationality, not based on calculation, but based on emotions. And therefore, when we advertise a product, we don't try and rationally convince you that this is what you need for your life. We try to appeal to your emotions, to what you can't control. They understand human nature. Unfortunately, they understand it a little too well. You know, but this is who we are. We are generally controlled by our emotions. And if you looked at it in the course of a day, and I can see it for myself, me who's written these books, who's tried to preach this for years, it happens to me all of the time.
Are you find yourself catching yourself more now? I mean, after writing a book like this, you're like, ah, shit, I'm doing the thing that I just wrote about.
Oh, all the time.
That's amazing.
All the time. You know,
I just think it seems to me like
like I'm buying this product. Why am I buying it? Am I buying it because I like it, or I've done research, or because I saw an ad, or because it appeals to some weird emotion in me? You know, and I catch that all the time.
You want to know what I think is the weird thing with products too is, like, you're buying, let's say, a new hot pair of shoes that everyone loves. You're buying it because it makes you feel some sort of way, but you're also buying it because it makes other people react emotionally to it, and therefore to you, and it's a status symbol, right? So you've now tricked yourself and everyone else in this loop.
Right, now they want it now too as well.
Yeah, now you're
Viral
cooler.
effects.
You feel like you're cooler.
Yeah.
The actual shoes aren't any better.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
And I just feel like, to me, the way I view it, tell me if you agree, is like, it almost seems like, okay, got it. So if I could get out of the way of as many biases and as much irrationality as possible, that is the path to creating my own destiny, right? Getting where I want to go. Like, I want to accomplish this. This is logically what it takes to do that. I can't get caught up in all of the things in the way of getting there, whether it's your marriage, you want an incredible marriage, you want an incredible business, you want a whatever. Is that kind of, does that seem on track to you, or?
Yes. I mean, you know, we have to make decisions every day, let's say with our business or our career. And so many times what determines our decision is what other people are thinking or other people are doing. You know, this is the cool career choice because other people have chosen it. This is this is what my shareholders are telling me is what we need to do for our company. And 99% of the time, you're basing important life-changing decisions based on what other people are thinking and doing, and not what's important to you. Get rid of that, and you can start making more balanced, rational decisions that will be much more effective. You know, I try and make the point in several chapters that there's something unique about you, and that is your source of power, that you are weirder and stranger than you think. And your uniqueness, your weirdness, is what will potentially bring you success as an entrepreneur, as a writer, as an athlete. Even athletes, the more unique you are, the more you have a unique skill or personality, the more successful you'll be. And listening to other people and following what other people are doing is the main enemy towards that.
Okay, so then also Law 8. I loved Law 8, which is change your circumstances by changing your attitude. So, and it's also, you said, the law of self-sabotage. I think this is another thing that I wish, number one, I wish I could master it, you know, and I wish it on everyone else. I have very close people around me, some of them that you just see like, man, you have a bad attitude. You have this terrible attitude, this outlook on everything, and you are creating this self-fulfilling prophecy, and no one wants to be around you. But you can't break through to those people. And I don't think it's worth even trying, right? Trying to go out and change everyone because you read this new cool book. But I guess what I wanted your initial opinion on is, like, number one, how big of an effect does this have on people and their outcomes in life? And is it changeable?
I wouldn't have written it if I don't think it's changeable.
Yeah.
As you say, there are people with extreme attitudes that probably can't change. I make the distinction between a closed attitude and an open attitude.
Yeah.
The closed attitude is fearful, wants to have everything under control, wants to narrow this. I say your attitude is like a lens on the world,
Yeah.
and it's how you view the world. And when you're closed and fearful and you want to control everything, that aperture narrows down to so you only see a small percentage of what's really happening around you
Yeah.
because you're so afraid you're trying to control everything. I want to open up that aperture. I want you to be less judgmental. I want you to kind of not be sitting there judging everything around you, but looking at it and understanding and accepting life
Yeah.
and accepting people and accepting the bad things that happen to you and accepting failure.
Yeah.
Okay? And that will change you. But look, this is a very important chapter because, we've all experienced it on some level. So you meet somebody for the first time and you sense that they're afraid, that they're insecure and fearful or hostile. And you kind of, I don't really want to be around this person.
Yeah.
They pick up that signal from you and they get their reaction. They become more afraid and more hostile.
Yeah.
They are creating it by their attitude. They create your reaction, which reinforces their reaction.
Yeah.
So they are creating their circumstances. They are making people push them away. They are making people hostile toward them by their attitude. So you are doing the same thing. Yeah. We've all had the other experience where someone comes up to us and they're friendly and they're open and they like us. Yeah. We melt. We're open to them. Yeah. Their openness opens us up. If you're just aware that one single thing, that will alter so much of your life. Yeah. If you want to influence people, if you want to persuade them, and you can't go through life without trying to persuade people, by just approaching them with a different attitude, with one that is more open and confident, and actually you give off vibes that you like them, you will suddenly melt their resistance. So the attitude you have towards life will determine a lot of what you get. And if you have a negative, closed attitude, you sabotage yourself again and again.
You really are teaching people how to break out of the matrix, I think. You know what I mean?
Trying,
it's just the awareness. Like that. These are the parts of this that I read, and I'm like, man, simply by gaining the awareness and breaking out of the same routines or the same way that you've always dealt with everyone, can kind of break that pattern and therefore create you an entirely new life. Not to be dramatic about it, no pun intended, but like it really is that. I know one of the biggest things for me is I noticed, like I would say reading the chapter, the one that I fall into, or my biggest weakness in my progress is falling into the anxious attitude, right? Where I try to overly control and I try to make things seem like they're going to be so scary and there's so many different X factors and man, I don't know. And so I'll just skip that event or I won't go put myself in.
Right.
You know what I mean? That's my biggest thing that I always try to fight. And to be honest with you, when I went back and kind of tracked it, I think that it comes from my parents. My parents were incredibly loving, but they're also very protective and very safe. And the world is scary. And they're in Akron, Ohio, and they don't travel a lot. They don't do, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think one thing that was such a positive, being that they were so loving and took such good care of us, actually also has a negative side in that you're kind of programmed, But I think, I guess you already answered my question. My question is, can I continue to build that muscle and break out of that and change my future?
You can definitely do that. I'm very hopeful for you or for anybody, but that's what the 50th Law was about. So that one book will really focus on that issue. Yeah. But in that chapter, the fearful, anxious attitude is the desire to control everything around you. Mm-hmm. You're afraid of chaos. You're afraid of the unpredictable. And what you need to do for any kind of fear is expose yourself to what you fear the most. Yeah. So you catch yourself, I'm not going to go to this event because this and that can happen, or I might meet this person or whatever. Here's that attitude again. Yeah. All right, I'm going to force myself to go to this thing. Yeah. And then you discover that it's not as frightening as you think. I had an incident some 16 years ago where I was in a theater and there was a fire alarm, and I panicked. I got like insane claustrophobia, like I'm going to be trapped in this fire.
Yeah.
People were panicking. And from then on, I had claustrophobia. I had a panic feeling. I couldn't get on airplanes. I couldn't get on elevators.
Yeah.
And then I had to slowly get back into getting into a crowded elevator and say, you have nothing to be afraid of.
Yeah.
I had to do it over and over and over again and get on airplanes over and over again. So the fear became smaller and smaller. I don't have something really to fear. So you need to expose yourself to what you're anxious about.
Yeah.
A lot of people are afraid of failure, and so they never try anything in life.
Yeah.
They never attempt that project. They never write that book. They never start that podcast because they're afraid that if they do, they're going to fail. And failing is a worse feeling than actually just kind of withdrawing from the world.
Yeah.
Okay? So you have to like now force yourself. It's not easy to actually try and execute all those projects that are in your mind.
Yeah.
But you have to do it with baby steps. You have to try something small first, and overcome your fear of failure.
Yeah. So true. One thing that I started doing was, so like a big thing for me is, let's say I had a social thing to go to. This is my worst nightmare, right? It's like the social
You're
thing.
revealing this to your audience.
Yeah. We're honest here.
Okay,
Right? I'm going to
okay.
tell them what helped with me is, so my worst nightmare is like the social thing that I should go to. And a lot of opportunities come from those things, but there's no agenda. There's no goal. You're just going to hang out, right?
Yeah.
I hate that.
Yeah, I do too.
And so what I started doing, I found out that I was backing out of a lot of those things because of that. What I started doing was writing down before I would go what I was scared of or what I was fearing, or whatever.
Yeah.
And then after I went and came home, I wrote, was it worth going?
Yeah.
And what was the reality?
Yeah.
And it never, everyone was worth going to, and the results never matched the fears. And that sort of started
There you
getting,
go.
now when I got those fears, I would match them with what I knew the result was going to
Right.
be, and it would help.
I mean, there's always something to learn in every situation.
Yeah.
The way I approach life and people is it's all material. So every time I go to an event or I see people, it's material for my books.
Yep.
People don't like to know that because then they get a little worried about what they say to me.
Yeah.
But, nothing is boring or uninteresting because I'm always looking at people and finding out something about them.
Yeah. Yeah.
But your idea of writing things down is very good. Ryan Holiday is a big believer in that. So writing down what actually happened and comparing it is a good way to kind of objectively look at it later and see what happened.
Also, another big one that I loved and that I think is very like relevant to this moment is Law 13, which is advance with a sense of purpose. A lot of people, especially since I started putting out this type of content, a lot of people, that's one of the biggest questions I get is, how do I find my passion? How do I find my purpose? And I feel like with the rise of the career path of YouTube vlogger or social media influencer, it's like there's more than ever, there are these career paths that are about fame or followers and not about the purpose of what you're actually doing. I guess my question is, do you agree that there seems to be like a lack of purpose issue in the current events? And B, how do you find it?
Well, there is more now than ever because it used to be you'd find a career and you'd stick with it for 50 years. It would be kind of one thing.
Yeah.
I become a doctor, I become a lawyer, that's that, the other. Yeah. Now it's like the ground is gone from underneath us. Yeah. And we have one job for 6 months and then another for a year. Then we're fired and we have to find something else. And we end up having like 20 different jobs in our lives. Yeah. And it gets very confusing. And the other thing is you have this now smorgasbord of opportunities where I could be a blogger. I could be, a social media influencer.
Yeah.
I could do this or that or the other thing. And that kind of choice is paralyzing. Yeah. How do you decide from among so many things? Yeah. I personally don't like a lot of choice in my life. I like to narrow things down to A, B, or C. Then I can make a rational decision. If I'm confronted with 20 possibilities, I go nuts. Yeah. And that's the way the human animal is. We don't wake up in the morning like a cat or a dog. kind of programmed what we do. We have to decide, we have to determine how we fill our days, how we fill our own lives. So you need to see, you really have to understand who you are and what makes you different. So it's not so much finding your passion, it's finding out who you are deep down inside, what you were meant to do in life.
And how do I figure that out?
Well, I can't explain that in 5 minutes,
Yeah,
but I wrote, masteries about that in that chapter. But basically, when you were a child, before all this shit ruined you, before you listened to teachers, parents, and peers, you kind of knew who you were. You were attracted to things. You were attracted to certain kinds of activities. You were attracted to music. I have the story in my book of Steve Jobs. He's 6 years old. He walks by an electronics store in Sunnyvale with his father. He goes, whoa, these gadgets, these electronic gadgets. He was mesmerized. And he knew right then that he wanted to be designing that kind of, the gadgetry was what excited him. I have story after story of that. But you had that in your childhood. You've just forgotten about it. You have to go and kind of dig a little bit and look at yourself. You have to see those subjects and activities that excite you, that make your eyes pop open. And you have to understand what you hate in life. I realized early on at the age of 23 or so, I hate working for other people. I hate the politics. I hate all the game playing. I hate people's egos. I just want to work for myself. I really don't like working for other people. Okay? What you don't like is a very important component of this. What repulses you. A lot of people are pushed into careers by their parents or to make money, like being a lawyer or a doctor or whatever. But it's not coming from anything within, and you don't learn anything. You don't grow in that career because it isn't who you are. So you need to know who you are. You need to know deep down inside in your core what makes you unique. Because if you look at any powerful, successful person in life, from Kobe Bryant to Elon Musk or whomever, they're unique. They're one of a kind. You don't see other people like that. They've taken their own uniqueness and weirdness and transformed it into something very successful.
And it sounds like if you don't, not that it's find it or die, but it seems like if you don't search for that and incorporate it into your life, you pay for it.
It is find it or die, let's just be honest.
Okay, great.
Because what will happen is in your 30s and 40s, if you never found it, this kind of feeling starts welling up inside of you, like you've wasted your time, like something is missing, and you won't know why, and you'll start taking drugs, you'll start having affairs, you'll start finding something. I call them false purposes. False purposes to sort of fill you up. One of them is getting attention, finding some way to just fill yourself up with attention on social media, whatever. And it will lead to the finding in your 50s where you feel quite bitter and resentful, and you're not a very happy person, and nobody really wants to be around you. You will pay a price for this. It is life or death, and I want you to think of it that way.
That's great. That's so cool. Okay. Next one. I'm just having too much fun here.
Don't worry.
I can talk for an hour per chat per rule. Okay. Law 14 I also loved, and I also thought ties in massively to the current climate.
Sure.
So that is resist the downward pull of the group. And I love this quote that's in there by Eric Hoffer that says, when people are free to do as they please, they usually imitate each other, which is, I love, it's so good, right? So my question is, why do we act, fundamentally, in our human nature, why do we group up so much? Why is it this us versus them? Why is it, because there's a lot of that going on, like we were talking about before the pod. I feel like with politics and stuff, if you're a Republican, then you need to hate these things and love these things because that's what your group thinks. If you're a Democrat, blah, blah, blah. And now it's just who can hate each other more. And the same is going on with a lot of these other little groups that are forming on the internet. And the internet's kind of allowing people, there's a lot of great things about it, but it's also allowing people to find each other and create groups a little better.
Yeah.
And my question is, I feel like sometimes you look at people getting like it seems like they're brainwashed, and it's like you don't even believe that. You're just saying that because that's what your group says. Why fundamentally do we group up like that?
Well, we are a social animal, and biologists, we can study other social animals. We are no different in that sense from dogs, from wolves, from bees, from ants. We are by nature, as a primate, a social animal. And what that means is our survival from very early on depended on operating as a group. And operating as a group, we had to think as one. If we're a band of 30 people before language some 600,000 years ago, and all kinds of predators are roaming around or hostile tribes, we can't afford to be out there thinking about our own thoughts or being an individual. We have to bond together in fear and hatred of this enemy. And so we are primed as human animals to work together in a group and to have a kind of group mind and group mentality and see the world as threats out there and us, the group that is bonded together. Yeah. It's a deep, deep human need to feel like we belong to a group. Yeah. You know, and I describe in the book that being in a group creates a certain kind of emotion that you never get outside of it. Yeah. If you've ever been to like a rock concert or a rave, that feeling of oneness with the group is really powerful. Yeah. We can't control that. These viral emotions that we get in a group are beyond our control. Yeah. And they can be positive, but they can also be extremely negative. Yeah. And so what happens is with social media is it sort of feeds the tribal tendencies that we as humans can have. Because what do we do on social media? We find those people who think just like us, and we form a group, and we live in a kind of echo chamber in which we only see those opinions that sort of feed what we already believe, only kind of making them stronger, right? So social media is not, it should be, but it isn't a medium where we can connect with people who think differently and expose ourselves to other forms of thought. It feeds our tribal instincts. We also live in time of great uncertainty, both about our jobs, our careers, the environment, our politics. And when things are insecure and chaotic, we tighten up, we form groups. We believe in our white identity, in our whatever identity. We have to get that kind of bond to give our lives a sense of control and order. Yeah. But it's false. You know, I read a book recently by a young Palestinian. It'll be out in a few months, about growing up in the occupied territories. And he expressed something that I was trying to say in my book. Israelis and Palestinians come from the same stock. Yep. They actually look quite similar. Yep. They have very similar values. Palestinians are extremely hardworking. Yep. They're extremely intelligent and educated. They're actually very similar. If you went back 5,000 years ago, they're the same people. They come from the same roots. Yeah. So this division, this hatred, this insane violence is for no purpose. Yeah. You know, and I try and say in the book that what you really want to identify is with the human race, that we are all really essentially the same, that the differences that we focus on skin color or whatever, are actually illusions.
Yep. That's so interesting. Because also I feel like the internet allows you can group up and then you can try to act from the safety of wherever you are, right? Meaning you can be in your basement shouting racist things, or you can be on a message board about white supremacy, or you can, you know what I mean? And it not only creates an ability to find others like you, but then you can sort of like throw, grenades from the safety of your room or, wherever you are. It's interesting. And I think, would you agree that as you see more media coverage of riots and protests and this thing that happened the other day with the kid wearing the Make America Great Again hat and the Native American man, it just makes people even more fearful, which then makes you more grouped up, and it's just kind of this circle that we're in?
Yeah, it's a vicious cycle, yeah.
It's interesting.
I lost my train of thought there.
Yeah, and I didn't even have a direct question. I just more like when you
I had a thought, but I can't.
Yeah, when you said that that the fear only makes it
worse.
I
know what I was going to say. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
A lot of I wrote an article that you can see on Medium.com about I have the 7 toxic types of people on social media,
Yep.
and those people who present, they're so violent and strong and,
Yeah.
and masculine or aggressive.
Yeah.
You can bet at home they're this weak, timid little boy
Yeah.
who behind the screen and internet gets to act all brave and strong.
Yeah.
But they're not like that at all. That's another factor in social media.
Yeah.
But
Yes, it's interesting. And I think that, we also, it's this weird convergence of things where also there's so much content out there and so much news out there that news has to be as dramatic as possible to catch your attention. So now everything seems like the sky is falling every single day.
Yeah.
Which then is making people just more scared, which then is making them team up more, which then, you know what I mean? It's like,
like
how does this end? Are you
we're
right?
creating our own madness,
Yeah.
and it's the media is certainly feeding that.
Yeah.
Because it's never about like what's really going on, what's really happening in the world,
Yeah.
what really we can do to solve these problems.
No, it's about getting the clicks and
Yeah,
and the worse it is, the better it is for your traffic.
I
You don't
know.
realize that you're creating the actual thing.
yeah, yeah.
It's not because there was whatever you said in here in the beginning. Whatever you said, we ignore this at our own, sort of at the risk of real danger. And I like that you said that because it's like it is a time when these sort of things are happening, and like we need to. Like, do you feel this like need to sort of wake up and realize these things because all of this is happening so severely, or is that how you see it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know whether the things are going to keep getting worse, or we will find our balance, because in one chapter I speak about how these moments of madness
Yeah.
have happened before in the past,
Yep.
even without media. They've happened during the plague in the 14th century.
Yeah.
They happened in the 100 Years' War. They've happened during the French Revolution. They happened during the McCarthy witch hunts of the early 50s.
Yep.
This kind of group madness keeps recurring, and somehow later we find our balance. So I'm not sure whether this is just a momentary trend, and a new generation will arise that will kind of realize that this is a madness and it's sickening,
Yeah.
and that we're destroying the planet through this, and that we're going to kill ourselves as a species,
Yeah.
and they will wake up, or whether this is just a downward spiral. I really don't know the answer to that. But yeah, I wanted to wake people up because I do think ignoring human nature and ignoring the fact that we are a violent creature and that we have aggressive tendencies, and that if we don't control ourselves, we're going to destroy ourselves. And I think we are at a kind of turning point here.
And then as far as the groupthink goes, is it a similar, once again, this is all in the book, so please go read it, but for the sake of this short version, is it an issue of awareness? Is it like by reading this, by realizing that you may be getting caught in groupthink, you can then break out of that and
Yeah.
think about your own values and your own...
Yeah, most definitely. Myself, I know that I am a Democrat, a liberal, you could say that.
Yeah.
But I realize often that my ideas are just simply mimicking the party line instead of questioning them. So with this awareness that you are not, I'm trying to tell you, you are not as much of an individual as you think. Just hammer that into your brain. Repeat it every day. I am not as much of an individual as I think I am. So many of my ideas and my opinions come from the group, come from the tribe that I belong to. And if you become aware of that, then you can catch yourself and you can say, well, maybe I need to think for myself. Maybe this one idea of my tribe is not a good idea. Maybe I can, separate myself out. I remember it was very interesting to give you an idea about how we are like a pack animal.
Yeah.
I gave a talk at Microsoft some 10 years ago. And this is, thousands of employees, 30,000 people in this one office.
Yeah.
And I was amazed at how everyone looked alike. They all kind of had similar haircuts.
Yeah.
They all kind of dressed alike. But more scary was how they all kind of behaved the same way. They had all the same kind of fearful approach.
Yeah.
Instead of the kind of closed. That's what happens to us in a group environment. If you work around 100 people, you start absorbing their temperament, their emotions, their belief system, their attitudes.
Yeah. That's so good. How, with all of this information from all the books that you have now absorbed, like, do you do like affirmations, or do you keep a list? How do you make sure that you're properly practicing all of this? You know, because like when I read this book, I want to write down my favorite 10 things and remind myself 10 times a day, like, you are not as individual as you think. You're this, you know what I mean? So that I can really get the full benefit out of it. Do you do any of that, or do you just
Me
have
personally?
Yeah.
Well, I wrote the book, so I don't need to do any of that because it's like
Just locked in.
I need to get away from my book. from
You're
time.
right. You're right.
But I wrote some material that if you order the book and you go to my website, I can give it to you. I wrote out ideas about how to use this book in a practical way. That's on my website. And basically, it's to take all the ideas in the chapter and try and write down how you notice this has happened to you and to other people. So I talk in the book a lot about types of people, toxic types, etc.
Yep.
I want you to write down notes of people who you know in real life like this. I want you to make the book kind of personal. Yeah. This has been a moment where this happened to me. This is when it happened to other people. When I write about your attitude towards life and I give you different kinds of attitude, I want you to determine what your attitude towards life is and write it down. On and on and on. When I talk about the dark side, I want you to then see your own dark side and take notes and sort of plummet for a while. Because I say knowing your dark side is actually a good key to unlocking some of your creative potential. You know, so writing things down is very, very helpful. And dealing with the book as if you're talking to me, to the writer, and having a dialogue with how these things actually are affecting you on a day-to-day level.
Okay, man. We did. We did. I mean, like I said, I could talk to you for hours and hours. Let me ask you this: What do you do next? Like,
Moi?
What do you say?
Me, moi.
Yeah. What do you enjoy the success of this and wait till another idea comes to you? Like, how do you figure out?
Well, talking about purpose in life, when I finish a book, it's great, but it's also kind of empty. Because it really filled my time. And so I don't want to wait too long until the next book comes. So each prior book kind of tells me what the next one will be. So I had a kind of a near-death experience with a stroke. Nearly died for several reasons, and I have a very difficult process getting back. And the last chapter of the Laws of Human Nature is how we deal with death and mortality, and how we can turn this great fear of ours into something extremely positive and something beautiful. And if you're able to do that, you have the ultimate power in life that will change how you look at everything. I call this, in the book, I call this the sublime, this sort of ability to accept your mortality and to accept everything that happens to you and go on to a higher plane. I'm writing a book on that and how that you can practically apply that to your life.
Amazing.
And about kind of what it's like to feel like you've returned from the dead, which you kind of know as well.
For sure. And are you obviously going to tie in your own, what happened to you, into that?
Yes, to some degree. I've never done that in a book. I've never talked about myself. But I will. I will talk about that weird feeling. I didn't have any, like lights or what people often express. But I have a feeling in my bones that occurred after the experience that has never left me. It's funny because in that chapter on mortality, I wrote about confronting your own death as something visceral, as something inside your body. But it was intellectual. And then I experienced it. I experienced it as a feeling that I have and that will never leave me. But it's a kind of a positive thing, because awareness of your mortality makes you more aware of being alive.
Amazing. Okay, this is my last one.
Your last question?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'll let you. I kept you as long as I could.
Okay, sorry.
What if you could go back in time to 16-year-old long-haired
Oh,
hippie version of Robert. Is there anything if you could tell yourself anything, to just have a quick little message from the future to maybe take away a lot of the unnecessary worrying or time spent doing stuff that didn't matter? Is there anything you would tell yourself?
you know, it sounds weird, but I feel like my life it was almost like fate. It's kind of egocentric of me, but it's almost like everything had a reason and a purpose.
Yeah.
So the drugs was a good phase for me to go through.
Yeah.
To this day, I meditate a lot, and the feelings that I had about, wow, life is pretty weird and interesting, they returned to me.
Yeah.
So it altered how I look at the world, and it still does.
Yeah.
It was positive. My being lost for 15 years and trying 20 different jobs and being depressed and maybe even suicidal was positive, because it made me realize what I don't want. During that time, I developed all kinds of writing skills. I got life experiences. I traveled.
Yeah.
And then when I got my opportunity, I was ready. I was ripe for change.
Yeah.
If that man had asked me 10 years earlier if I had any book ideas, it would have never happened.
Yeah.
So looking back, everything seems oddly like fateful, like it happened for a reason, like the gods up in Mount Olympus were looking down and directing me in this path.
Yeah.
It sounds ridiculous, but it feels that way.
Yeah.
And even the stroke feels like it's kind of had a reason for it.
Yep.
Slowing me down, making me realize that I'm not immortal, etc. It's a weird kind of shivery feeling sometimes that overcomes me.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't regret anything. I would go back to that long-haired 16-year-old and say, enjoy yourself, do whatever you're doing. You're doing the right thing.
Yeah. Amazing. That's so important. Listen, man, I can't thank you enough for coming and doing this,
Thank you. My
sharing all
pleasure,
this
man.
with the audience. I'm so happy that you're recovering quickly.
Yeah.
And we're going to get a book out of it. You're going to turn this negative into a positive. Can't wait to read that. But thank you so much. And
Thank you
this was
for
great.
for giving me all this time.
Yeah, of course. Anytime. Listen, anytime you want to talk, I'd love to talk to you.
All right. Sure.
Thank you, Robert.
Guys, if you like that and you want to see more like it, as well as vlogs, other web series, and all the random stuff that I'm doing here on YouTube, don't forget to click that subscribe button. You won't regret it. I promise.